I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This panel is Ask the Experts. I'm Michael Lavorgna from audiostream.com, and I want to clear up some confusion. That's Art Dudley. I am not Art Dudley. So we're good on that. So what I thought we'd do, and just get right into this, is just have each of the panelists introduce themselves. We've got a very nice, the backgrounds of everyone up here is very diverse, so I think it's going to be a great session. I'd just like to get started. So Steve.
Hello. I'm Steve Silberman. I work at AudioQuest. I'm Vice President of Development. I got switched on to computer audio about 6 or 8 years ago, sort of surreptitiously through this other guy down here, Gordon Rankin. I worked at a company called Air Acoustics, and we developed the first solid-state asynchronous USB DAC, and we did it in large part because of Gordon. And the last 6 or 7 years, I've really thrown myself into computer audio and figuring out ways to make it work better, figuring out ways to make it more acceptable and more fun for average people using things like Mog and YouTube and Spotify and iTunes. And the last couple of years, I worked on with a team of people at AudioQuest and with Gordon Rankin, we worked on a project called Dragonfly, where we made a $250 asynchronous USB DAC. So very cool product, very, very approachable, and that's my story.
It's not morning anymore, but hello. Been doing a lot of traveling lately. In fact, the guy before me was up in Toronto doing his HDMI thing. Went up to the Toronto show recently. My name is Mark Waldrep, and I have AIX Records, which is 12 years old now, making new high-resolution audio recordings with video on most of them, including some now in Blu-ray and even a few with 3D video with multiple 5.1 channel mixes, but they're all recorded at 96 kilohertz 24. We also have a digital download site, which I started about 6 years ago, that allows you to download any of the tracks that we have and any other tracks from other labels that are in fact real high-definition audio recordings. Tracks that were recorded at 96 kilohertz, 24 bits when the musicians were present is what my definition of a high-definition audio track is about. And we're out in the Evergreen Room. It's been pleasant this morning. I actually made a disc with Bose, and Bose I know is not necessarily associated with the audiophile world. They do a pretty good job in the cars, and we put these in Porsche automobiles years ago. So if you're looking for a DVD audio disc, I've got a box of these that I'm handing out for free, but you got to be able to play a DVD audio disc, which is kind of yesterday's technology, although they still are selling head units. A guy came to me in Toronto and said, I just bought a new Lexus. It's got a DVD audio head unit in it. Where can I get software? I got the software for you.
My name is Rob Robinson. I'm Director of Engineering at Channel D, and we make the popular music player products, Pure Music and Pure Vinyl, which is also ties into the analog world. I've been involved more or less loosely with what could be called computer audio for about 25 years now. And really my roots are more in analog and enjoying analog. So it took me a while to really get computer audio adopted into my personal home system, and that's been about 12 years ago, and it's something that wouldn't resemble what's available now in terms of usability. But I'm always looking for ways to link analog and digital together in ways that are really appropriate for this type of venue. And we've introduced our first products, Pure Vinyl and Pure Music, about 6 years ago for Pure Vinyl, and that's all I have to say.
Here, I'll take this. Okay. Hi, I'm Gordon Rankin. I guess good afternoon, everyone. My story is pretty simple. I started out in the computer industry for years, but I hated it, so I wanted to do what I love best, which was audio. And 95, my wife talked me into starting my own company, and did pretty much tube equipment for a long time. And then 8 years ago, I stumbled across USB as a possible substitute for SPDIF, and the story kind of goes on from there. I think I've designed about 35 DACs since then, all asynchronous technology, and we're going to move forward. There's going to be a lot of new technology this year, I think, because the computer industry is moving into Thunderbolt. We're seeing a lot more Ethernet possibilities, so look for some fun things this year.
My name is Andreas Koch, and I was actually lucky enough to be involved in almost every major format launch in the audio industry, CD and AC3, AC1, Dolby, and SSCD, then through Sony and Philips. My background is engineering, and I developed the first digital tape recorders, or one of them at Studer in Switzerland. I was also involved very early on in digital hard disk recording, and at Sony then developed the mastering and authoring tool for SSCD, the Sonoma workstation. And with that then, after that, I was involved in A to D and D to A conversion technology, and started Playback Designs in 2007. And that's what I'm doing now with SSCD, CD players, and D2A converters.
Hi, my name's David Chesky. I got into music when I realized my aspirations to be the heavyweight champion of the world was not going to happen. So I'm basically a composer, and I still work with many orchestras, and I have positions with them now. But I also have a company, Chesky Records, which we're doing a new series of binaural plus recordings for headphones and speakers. And I also have a company called HD Tracks.
Great. So questions? No? Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the right panel to ask, but when connecting a USB DAC, what is the best way to access your hard drive storage? Like an Ethernet cable, wireless, Firewire 800, Thunderbolt, or other?
I'll answer that. Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt's probably the best because it's the fastest interface that there is. And if you're going to use a USB DAC, you don't want to use like a USB hard drive because you don't want that congestion at the USB controller. If you use Ethernet as a NAS server or something like that, that makes it nice if you're sharing music to other computers in your house, but it's really a pretty slow technology for moving files around or audio data around. So I would say Thunderbolt, then Firewire, and then probably Ethernet would be the lowest.
Gordon used an acronym, and I was leaving the floor open for Gordon because he usually asks this question of the audience. NAS means network attached storage, and it's an efficient way and very, very nice way to store large amounts of digital audio data. But the question is, how many people in the room, by a show of hands, are using computer audio in their home systems? I don't mean like portable speakers in front of their computer, but actually as a part of their main playback system. Okay, good. So about 50, 60% it looks like. That's good. And I guess it's good to ask a question like that because it helps to focus the discussion so that we don't get off into jargon land and actually keep it of interest to everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Just about the binaural, if he has any ear samples or for sale, and if there's going to be a broader type of experience for the consumer, maybe it was spread broader.
Well, this is a project we've been working on for 2 years. It's in conjunction with the physics lab at Princeton University. Here's the thing. It's a future audio format that you can play now. What we do is we record with a binaural head. But binaural recordings can't be played back on speakers because the pinna, the equalization's all off. So we developed a diffuse equalization curve so it can be played back on speakers. That's why we call it binaural plus. So it plays back on headphones perfectly, and it doesn't destroy any of the cues, spatial cues. And you can also play it perfectly on a pair of speakers. Now, in our place in New York, in our studio in my home, it's set up to play binaurally through 2 speakers. And here's the deal. when you listen to surround music, it's basically like a hula hoop around you. There's no density to the sound. There's sound there. It's this hula hoop. When you watch a 3D movie and you take the glasses off, you see the corruption in the video because there's corruption there. And you put the glasses on, it's 3D. Well, what we're trying to do is, when you listen to two speakers, there's so much crosstalk corruption between the two speakers, you're missing, you know, like 60, 80% of what's going on. Because, you know, when you hear, let's just say you hear an orchestra, the whatever's over there, the percussion player, okay, it's got to, they hit a note, and it's got to go around your head, and it hits this ear first, and there's a delay, and it hits the other ear, okay? So there's time delay, and there's also level delay, because that level is going to be a little different when it hits the right ear. So the brain can figure all this out, okay? So when you record with a dummy head, it has all the pin cues there. So you get all this information. If we just put up two microphones, the two microphones pretty much hear it exactly at the same time. Now, when you listen to a pair of speakers in your house, there's not enough distance. Your left ear and your right ear are hearing the same speaker at the same time. So it's messing up all these cues. So what, actually, we're working with Edgar Truori at the physics lab. What he's developed is, it's a filter called Bach filter. And he's going to sorry about this. It's so dry here, I can't talk. Anyway, we demonstrated at CES, but when you put a filter in, and it's a very different thing, you just can't filter something. Basically, when we did it at my studio house, we put a dummy head there. And the dummy head calibrates the room where the speakers are and everything. And if you sit where the dummy head is, all of a sudden, the recording becomes binaural 3-dimension. And I'm talking about height, absolute 90-degree lateral imaging that is totally locked in. You're in a 3-dimensional sound field, and there's density to the sound. See, the problem with regular recording, even in surround, there's no density. Well, we could take a sound, and we can move the sound from your ear to ear, nose, anywhere around there. And if we can do that, that means when you hear an orchestra, the perspective is absolutely perfect. The timpani player's back there, the flute player's there. So basically, I think in audio, we're going down this path for so long that we live in this auditorium and we see the white wall. But if you peel the ball back, it's maybe blue. And I think we have to have a renaissance and get out of this way of thinking that you sit in front of two speakers and that's a stereo sound field, because it's not. There's such a bigger picture waiting around the corner for everybody. When these technologies get a little more refined, we can put you in this space. You know, stereo is like this. It's like a peeping Tom. You're looking inside somebody's window. When we put you in a binaural sound field, you're in the actual event, and it's really scary and startling. And I think it brings you that much closer to the whole thing. But in the meantime, the people in the Cam Jam have a lot of these recordings, and you can hear them on headphones. And then some people here have them, and you can hear them on speakers. But you're not going to really be able to hear these properly for another year or 24 months till the hardware starts to come out to actually decode it.
Thank you.
Next. Yes.
For those of us who are looking to start using computer-based audio, what are some recommendations you would make to do it right the first time?
You have to ask yourself, many different questions, and one of them is, are you a PC or a Mac person or a Linux person? Are you more familiar with those operating systems? And that drives your decisions on a computer platform. Also, where does your sources come from? Do you want to store them on a NAS? And what is your backup strategy? You need to be aware that whatever you store on a hard disk can be lost. So you have to have a backup strategy there. And if your library is very large, that can be daunting. Those are all very basic questions that you need to ask yourself. And then, the connection from the computer platform to the DAC, and it's got to be an external DAC. Today USB is a common technology that allows the DAC to be set up in the most or in the best possible way as a clock master. tomorrow we'll have probably other technologies, but today USB is probably the recommended technology to link it up. There might be other questions that you need to ask yourself depending on your needs.
Yeah, and basically just to summarize, there are three main pieces that you need to have. It's a computer, so you choose the computer platform, first of all. Choose the DAC, okay, digital to analog converter, you choose that, and figure out how you're going to store the audio. Probably some of the people in the room that are just getting interested in computer audio are wondering, why is computer audio such a big buzzword right now? Why is it such a hot thing? And it's not that suddenly manufacturers collectively woke up and realized that there was this untapped market or something. It wasn't really possible to do it until now because we needed enabling technologies that made it affordable and usable. And really the key enabling technology was storage. 10 years ago, it would cost you maybe $300 to store a couple dozen CDs uncompressed. The size of the disk drives were maybe 50 gigabytes. Now they're in the terabyte range. So that made it really a viable proposition to be able to store large amounts of music on your system.
Regarding what you just talked about, what is your opinion about the best format to record?
To record, or you mean to store the audio?
To store, FLAC, AIFF.
Well, they're all equivalent bit perfect formats, and I think there is some noise about that different file formats sound different and that sort of thing, but there are a lot of variables that go into what makes the way these things sound and different systems sound. So I don't think if you were to really carefully dissect the arguments that someone hears the difference between FLAC and WAV, I think you could probably pin down the reason why that occurs. So the file format is the one that you would like to use best on your system. Our products are on the Mac platform, and in the Mac environment, that would be AIFF or Apple Lossless. Both are bit perfect. I store my music in Apple Lossless. I'm really sensitive to nuances in the audio because I'm really more of an analog sort of guy. But I like the idea that it stores 30% more audio on a given hard drive size because I have boxes full of hard drives as I've upgraded incrementally over the years that I no longer use. They're just sitting there in a pile. And really, if you want to get into this in the big way, probably get a network attached storage with multiple drive base that you can expand the system. And right now, I mean, you can, when you consider the amount of money you spend on your audio system, you can get a tens of terabyte storage for a couple $1,000s that, I mean, you can't say that it's going to last you forever because that's what you always say, and then you find out that there's new formats that come out, right? Especially nowadays. If the floodgates really open up and we get all this great music that's been recorded over decades in high-resolution formats, that will just be fantastic. So plan for expansion, and really what seems like a huge hard drive today really won't be in a year or so.
I actually wanted to add something to that. I find that there's a noticeable difference in sound between AIFF and Apple Lossless, or FLAC and WAV. I find that the fully uncompressed files sound better, and as was pointed out before, storage is so cheap. Just rip everything as an AIFF file if you're in an Apple world, or use something like WAV if you're in a Windows world. And in terms of storage, I prefer storing everything either on Thunderbolt or through FireWire, and I use a RAID array storage, so everything is backed up. And then I actually back up my backups. So I have a nice RAID array, so everything's backed up. I've got about 4 terabytes worth of music, so I've got 4x4, and then I've got another 4 terabyte hard drive that I keep in a closet that I take out once a month to just do something through one of the programs like Carbon Copy or ChronoSync to back everything up. I find that works really good. And in fact, I prefer the sound of music coming over FireWire or Thunderbolt over music coming over Ethernet for what it's worth. So, you know, everybody up here is going to have their own take and their own twist, just like everybody in the audience has their own take and twist on setup in their system. But I find that fully uncompressed files sound far better, and storage is so cheap, who cares? You know, you can get terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of storage for next to nothing. I mean, I remember the first time I heard the word terabyte, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was so beyond the realm of reasonability. Now it's $100 or something. So I'm sure other guys have something.
Maybe one more point to add here. You know, there's maybe a parallel to the photography. You know, when you shoot pictures, you shoot generally in raw format so that you can always take advantage of, you know, the conversion technology of today. Same thing with audio files. You know, whatever you download, you know, from the Cheskys, keep it in its native format. And later on, when there's more conversion technology or conversion algorithms available, you can take advantage of that if you have to, or let the DAC do the conversion. But generally, always keep the file format in its native format.
I would also add one final thing along the lines. You mentioned 3 items. Look, as a recording engineer in a record label, making new recordings in high def and offering those recordings as downloads, the recording quality is locked in at the time of the original recording. And so taking something that was recorded 40 or 50 years ago and putting it in a 176.4 bucket or a 192 bucket is spending extra megabytes on your hard drives with no audible benefit. There is a span of, we should be able to record, and Neil Young, I know, is now on Pono and other things, making the original source recordings available at their master quality. But that master quality level has modified itself over the course of 40 or 50 years. And I will put any of the recordings that we've actually made in 5.1 at 96 kilohertz, 24 bits in live auditoriums with no processing and so forth, up against stuff that's also recorded in an audio file way from 30 or 40 years ago on a piece of vinyl, and you will be more immersed, and there will be higher frequencies and greater dynamic range. We got a review in Absolute Sound one time that said my Bolero had too much dynamic range. Too much dynamic range because the previous formats required us to compress that down to fit on a piece of vinyl. It's not the same thing when you're dealing with 96K or higher PCM audio or some of the other high resolution formats. So making sure that you understand what I call provenance, where the history is of the tracks that you're buying, makes an incredible difference as to what your expectations are about the final audio delivery through your system, through your headphones, through whatever. It's all of those stages that actually make a difference. One final thing, my PhD is in music, and my subcategory was binaural audio. And I know a lot about traveling around with a Neumann head. I took him up in a hot air balloon and on a boat ride. We went into a cave together. We had a whole adventure for a week. Me and my stereo 4S Nagra back when I was studying for my doctoral degree. And it is absolutely possible to make wonderful recordings. I've made orchestral recordings. For the sound of the recording that I prefer, binaural means that you have one point where you're actually locating your physical head to emulate the source of or the sound that you're going to get from an instrument that might be 15, 20, 30 feet away, whatever it is. In terms of the recordings that I decided to make and the aesthetic I bought into was because binaural and because of the 2 microphones requires you to record basically everything in stereo, I record in stereo in a Windham Hill kind of way, but I want to be this far away from the guitar, Windham Hill style, or this far away from the strings of a piano or from the members of the ensemble, because with electronics I can actually get that kind of intimacy to a wide variety of instruments at the same time. You can't do that with a binaural head or with your physical head because you can only be in one place at one time. If you can get that kind of intimacy and then physically mix multiple channels, stereo of most of the instruments, into a 5.1 surround array, it is then possible to deliver that obviously on an SACD or a DVD audio disc through downloaded files, or what we've come up with now is something called Headphones XI. If you go to iTracks or you go to iTunes right now, you can actually download headphone delivery of the sound of my room through my actually personal ears, through my B&W speakers and Bryston amplifiers and my $250,000 build-out room, where actually if you close your eyes and listen to the speakers or listen to what you're getting through a set of headphones, it's identical. That's my mission, to get past the generation of people that are mostly represented in this room down to my kids' generation, because they're not going to sit in the middle of a 5.1 home theater with speakers and and a rack of equipment. They want to be on their skateboard or on the bus or someplace at the beach listening to surround sound. And I am so passionate about surround sound and the difference that it makes when you listen to something in stereo versus being immersed in the sound field, that I want to make sure that we get that to a portable device. And I think the Headphones XI thing actually allows us to do that in a way that gives you the same kind of sound as if you were listening to a home theater 8-10 feet away, whatever it is.
Mark, are you set up here?
I actually have the box. If you come over, I can. It's never fails. I was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and I put a set of headphones, regular set of over-the-ear headphones, and then solo the speakers. I don't know if anybody in here has actually been through that, but boy, the time when I hit solo right surround speaker in a normal set of headphones, the sound comes out over your right shoulder, everybody's smile goes up. Whoa, you can't do that with headphones. Yes, you can. You do it with 2 ears every day, so why can't we do it with headphones? By the process, and in long term, I consider this the future of where audio is going. It's personalized music delivery. On iTracks, you can actually download each track 21 different ways. If you want AIF, great. You want WAV, great. You want FLAC because you want the metadata burned into the file already, great. You can download that too. I'm not willing to have the argument that a WAV file versus a FLAC file. If you find one preferable or they're the same, download whatever you like. But you can also extend that personalized music delivery to be what kind of perspective you're listening to, surrounds in stereo or in stage or audience perspective, or imagine it extends out to being able to process that sound through a set of Wilson Watt Puppy speakers on its way to your headphones. You can do that too. It becomes get it your way. It's a Burger King model.
I had a question. In the previous seminar, we were told that HDMI is going to be pretty much the panacea of sound and video quality for the next generation. How do you see HDMI being used in the computer domain? I heard that Mac, there's a way to get Blu-ray into a Mac via some interface that Panasonic has. But the other question would be, if you could get Blu-ray into your computer that format, how would you export HDMI to your computer, to your audio system?
Do you have to go HDMI? Well, at home in our system, my wife and I, we use a Mac Mini, and it's boot camped. So we run Windows 7 on it, and we run the latest Apple operating system. But we'll boot camp over to Windows, and we use a program called JRiver. And with JRiver, we've ripped all of our DVDs, and we've ripped all of our Blu-rays, and we use an external Blu-ray device and some software. I use HDMI just for the picture, and I use USB for the sound.
Maybe the question, it might be, what you're asking is a simple question. Is it possible to use HDMI to get audio out of a Mac? And it's really easy to do. You just need a device called an HDMI audio de-embedder. You plug the HDMI cable into one side, and on the other side there's a digital output, SPDIF, and it takes the whole stream, which is audio and video, and it de-embeds the audio, and then you can feed that to your DAC. And these things are a couple $100, and it's really no big deal. And it goes up to 192 kilohertz. So, but there are other ways to do it as well.
I just want to talk about something Mark said. This number thing is just a number thing. Our native thing we record now in 38432. It's just a number. But the bottom line is this: if you get a record from Mark, even if it's 44.1 or analog, he's a talented engineer. It's going to sound great. Anything you buy from Keith Johnson, reference recordings, and people like this, it doesn't matter. Because the bottom line is you need a guy who can set up a microphone, understands music, and get it. Guys like him, Keith Johnson, the old Telarc team, back in the day of Mercury, Bob Fine, these people get it. We get a lot of records today, they're brand new records, and they're, super high resolution, but, they're not really good because the guy behind the mixing desk doesn't know what he's doing. So, it's buyer beware. You have to listen to these things, because, so many people have a different vision, and it's got to be the vision you like. Now, with that said, okay, a lot of the things we like are in the past, then we have no control of that anymore. And I think part of this thing of archiving computer music or high-resolution download sites, it's to get these things that we grew up with and we love and to archive them in the highest format we can to preserve these. Because personally, for me, if I'm going to put on like a classical record, I like the Chicago Symphony with Fritz Reiner. It just does it for me. You know, it sounds great. Sure, there's limitations, there's peak overloads in this, but at the end of the day, the orchestra is phenomenal. The sound is phenomenal. For the day, they had limitations, but these guys really knew what they were doing. You listen to the old Mercury records. These guys knew what they were doing. Burt White with the Everest series, he knew what he was doing. So I think it's important also to do this, because maybe, you know, in 60 years they may take one of Mark's records and the guy will say, well, we're on to 10,000, 962 bits, but we're going to take his record and preserve it. So we have to look at audio as two things like that. And that's just, the way it is. We have to preserve things in the best way we can. And guys like him push the envelope, and Keith Johnson. So you should support these companies, because end of story, if their name is on it, you can rest assured it's going to sound good. Or you can go up to some other person, with some other orchestra, and you could say it's in 10,000 bits and it's done in 50 million samples. If he doesn't have the right microphones, it doesn't set it up the right room, and he doesn't have ears, game's over. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So you have to first understand that. So it's not, we're just a delivery system. You've got to really understand who's making the record, who's producing, who's engineering, and then you have to bank your money on these people.
We have a question up front. Yeah, I wanted to go back to the cabling issue from the computer to the DAC. And I think, at least on the Windows platform, a lot of our club members want to try computer music, but they don't want to invest in a new computer just to try it. And so most of us have been using our office computers at home, which are in a different room. And then this comes to the question then of cabling again. You guys were kind of favoring the USB cable with asynchronous DACs, which sounds great. But do you have any different opinions if you've got to travel more than 10 meters with your cable? Does that change the game plan?
Then you probably want to go with Firewire or something like that. Or, there's a number of optical extension. Oh, he's talking about, if you have to go over, 10 meters from the computer to the DAC itself, how do you accomplish that, since USB is pretty much limited, to 5 meters, but really 3 meters is where you would really want to cut it off for our 24 and 192, but you can get optical extenders that go up to, 160 feet, something like that, that you could take anywhere, you could put it anywhere you want. Or you can use DLNA and use an Ethernet type situation where you can put the DAC, in the other room and hook that up with Ethernet, and then, have your computer in the other room and set it up that way.
There is also, in addition to optical extenders, there are also electronic extenders that use Ethernet cable. They're just USB bus extenders. There are cheap ones for around $20 that won't work for audio, or at least high-resolution audio. But there are ones that support USB 2.0 and high-resolution audio that go for a couple $100, and they work very well, and they can go 30, 40 meters, 100 feet or more. Geffen makes one. They just came out with one, and they work very well. So that's a good way to get.
So you still prefer that over speed at long distance?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also, I happen to be a big fan. I'm not paid to support them. I have a number of their machines. But people like Oppo Digital have started making machines. The BD series of BD95, which is what I have in my studio, it does everything. I mean, I will plug it in at the Exponent show in March. I did it in Jacksonville last spring with $250,000 worth of Bryston amplifiers and B&W speakers and 3D projection. It's just my vision of what the future is, and I know all the people will walk by the door thinking I'm a home theater room, but it really is worth coming in and taking a listen, because that box allows me, and I run that $250,000 system with a $1,000 player. I went into the Bryston SP3 this year because I think their DACs are just to die for, through HDMI. But that becomes literally a server device when you look around at the back and you look at the eSATA connection. I hook my drives into that, and I can access any of the files that I have in full surround or stereo at any of the sample rates. Their new machines let you put in HDMI input, so you can take advantage of their really tremendous DACs. The funniest thing about it is when you pull up their interface, which is not particularly elegant to access all of these high flute and high digital surround files and so forth, the background image that they have there is a cartridge running through a groove on a turntable. So that's as close to analog turntables as I ever get. But I just thought that was kind of coincidental that they're here that dealing with the highest end possible, server technology, and the model for that high end is a picture of a cartridge in the screen.
I want to plug a product too. I didn't know we were plugging products. It's not my product. It's not my product either. I'm not going to plug my product. One of the best DACs you can buy. One of the best DACs you can buy if you're not sure what you want to do in terms of interface. You're not sure if you want to go with a traditional digital SPDIF input, or if you want to do Ethernet, or if you want to do USB. Pioneer Elite makes a DAC for $500. That's asynchronous USB. It does DLNA. It has a few SPDIF inputs on the back of it. It's absolutely spectacular. We actually set one up back here for some of the seminars tomorrow to use. It's very inexpensive. It's called the N50, Nancy 50. And if you're going to do something like Ethernet, I recommend you use Windows if you can boot camp your computer and use a product called JRiver. We've been doing a lot of experimenting with DLNA, the company I work at, just looking for reliable and predictable delivery methods. And in terms of a driver that can send out your data reliably to different devices without things crashing, or without, you run into these problems with DLNA where some devices just won't play certain formats. So JRiver will allow you to change the outgoing format so that it's acceptable by your device. And it's very, very easy to use. And you can also control it from your Android or your iOS device. So the interface is spectacular as well. So to answer your question, if your computer's on the other side of the house and you don't want to make a huge investment, but you want to have good sound and you're not sure what direction you want to go in, the Pioneer N50 is absolutely spectacular because it has every solution. And it also has a iOS input on the front of it, so you can plug your iPhone or your iPad or your iPod into it. And if you put your files on there uncompressed, they sound spectacular. The iPhones and the iPads are really, really nice sounding source devices if you put high quality files on them. So that device for $500 kind of hedges all bets and gets you over the first hurdle. So.
Yes. I had a question about, we're a couple weeks away from Windows 8 coming out, and I was wondering if there are changes in Windows 8 that would affect us that we would be concerned about for sound, either positively or negatively. If you guys had a chance to play with that at all.
I've just played around with it a little bit, and I work with the Windows Sound Group for protocol support and things like that for USB. 2 weeks ago, no asynchronous devices worked at all. So yeah, they're like, oh, your DAC's popping and clicking. And I'm like, oh, well, why don't you try it on Windows 7? Oh, we have a problem. So actually, I don't think anybody's going to know until it really comes out. And it sounds like they're working 24/7 on that. They will not even touch any support issues for Windows 7 or Vista or anything right now. So we'll probably know better when it's out. And I would suggest not probably getting it right away, because the first the first update is going to be when you want to take a look at it. But I think they're getting rid of Media Player. Yeah.
They're separating it out and you can purchase it as a separate product.
Yeah, I just didn't really understand thinking at all.
Oh, back here first.
Yes, thanks. The biggest problem I have with computer audio is not so much with the quality of the sound, but with the quality of the metadata. When I'm listening to pop, I often want to be able to store the composer of the song. When I'm listening to jazz, I like to keep track of who the performers are. When I'm listening to an opera, I want to know who's in the cast. If it's a symphonic work, I want to know who the conductor is and maybe the soloist and so forth. There are ways to store some of this information with existing product, but as you know, they're generally pretty clumsy. The solution that I came up with was to develop my own system, that permits me to enter all of the metadata. But the problem with that is that I have to enter all of the metadata. So I'm wondering whether you guys know, first of all, whether anybody else in the world cares. And if anybody else cares, are you aware of any movement to develop any products or new standards that would support higher quality, richer metadata?
I know somebody working on it, but I really can't talk about it.
Unfortunately, he could talk about it, but you wouldn't be able to leave
Yeah.
the room.
But get my card after the show, and maybe I can hook you up.
I don't have an answer to your question, but you raise a point indirectly of something I want to suggest to everyone here. Who uses iTunes as their library? Okay, good amount of people. There's a really cool guy named Doug, and he's got a site called DougScripts.com, and you can download a script in there, and you'll embed the script into your iTunes folder. And what you can do is you can run this script, and it will create a copy of the cover art as a JPEG, and it will put it in the music folder. So it's really a kind of a nightmare if you've got a huge iTunes library and you decide to move to something like JRiver, or maybe you want to use Sonos or some other device. You load all this music in, and then you don't have any cover art, and it's just kind of maddening. So if you're using iTunes on an Apple computer, this is Apple-only script, go download Doug's script. It's free. You can donate, decide what you think it's worth, and give him some money. He wrote the script. But you'll have the metadata, at least the cover art, which can be a real challenge if you move out of iTunes and into a new system. If you embed that cover art there to make it a lot easier for you.
Just on that point as well, a couple months ago I interviewed Ty Roberts, who's one of the founders of Gracenote. Gracenote pretty much owns the metadata market. And when I pressed him about that issue of quality of metadata and why is it so shabby, and his answer was blame the labels. The labels are responsible for providing it to us, and we essentially we give you what we get. But Gracenote also allows users to improve that metadata. And if the Gracenote database started out as a user-generated database, and then it went commercial, which caused some feathers to be ruffled. But
Michael, I have to disagree. I know Ty Roberts since the CD-ROM days ages ago, and here's an example of getting a product like what I do, which is, I understand these are very unique things, and what the hell do you call it, and where should it show up? This is a 3D Blu-ray that's audio-focused. I got it. But I fill out the form every month. It goes through a distribution channel. Rovi and Gracenote suck in the information. And when I go to Amazon right now and look for my product, it shows up under movies and TV. Mozart is named an actor. I'm the director. It's a Blu-ray audio disc if it's over the music side. Nothing can, and I have tried for months. And Amazon says, your category doesn't work. Yours is a movie. Because it's got video, it's a movie. So it's hopeless. I mean, I would just give up right now and keep entering it yourself.
What initiated this conversation between Ty Roberts and AudioStream was I downloaded the latest Neil Young record, Neil Young Crazy Horse, and the download came without any metadata whatsoever. And so I wrote a post about it, and this word trickled up back to Gracenote, and they said they would look into it. But yeah, I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to say the state of metadata is a sorry state. We try.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. You know, labels are supposed to put all this metadata in. We, you know, require the labels to do this. We check it. We do the best we can. And yes, some things, sometimes classicals show up as country and western records. It's the weirdest thing. But we also include complete PDF liner notes and things like that, just in case. You know, there is a transition. And I think it's a learning process for the labels, because you have to understand something. It's sort of like high-res. Major labels are used to an MP3, Amazon, iTunes platform where people really just want to hear the song, and that's it. So I think as public pressure demands these things, they're starting to get it, you know, and they're starting to put this information in, and it's a transition time. And also, to their defense, okay, we're going through a bad time in the major record business right now, as everybody knows. I mean, because of piracy these giant corporations are skeletons of what they were. So they have very skeleton staffs, and everybody's trying to do all this stuff. So it's just going to take a little time. And it's not really their fault. They're victims of what happened when the computer industry decided to sell you blank disk and give you the right to copy. All of a sudden, sales are down pretty much 90% for a lot of artists. So, but this will be rectified in time. We're trying to do it, but it's not an easy thing. And like I said, in the interim, you still have the PDF liner notes.
Great, yeah. Currently, I'm not in computer audio, and give you where I am from a computer user point of view. I'm still on a desktop with XP. Looking forward, one thing that never comes up in any article on computer audio, and that's the question of security. At some point in time, you've got to get online. I understand you want, ideally, a dedicated audio computer, and you want to have the minimum amount of software running on it. How do you protect yourself when you go online?
Well, I would, since you're looking at me, I feel like I should answer the question.
I'm looking at you as the host.
Yes, thank you. I'll start an answer and give you the simplest one.
Don't open emails from Nigeria.
Yeah. And you certainly want to be concerned about the sites you visit. You want to be cautious about the sites you visit. And that's one way to help protect yourself. Limit the sites that you visit to those sites that you know are reputable. If it's, that's one easy, and I know that's a very simplistic answer.
Well, and even then, that site could be compromised by somebody.
Well, and depending on your platform, there's certainly software you can use to help protect yourself against viruses. And the Microsoft platform is, I think, more prone to this issue than certainly the other platforms out there. But I'll pass that one on.
It's all really just a matter of controlling, thinking about what you're doing and not just more or less haphazardly going to websites that you're unfamiliar with. Well, look, the worst thing that can happen is your computer gets maybe infected with a virus. If you're using a computer that's dedicated to audio purposes, there's going to be a minimum amount of personal information on there that someone could steal, if that's what you're concerned about.
Destroy your hard drive.
Right. Okay, they destroy your hard drive, which you should have a backup. Right. But the worst thing that can happen is, it costs you some money. It doesn't really cause you irreparable harm, if that's what you're concerned about. I mean, as a developer of software, on computer platforms, I think there's been one time in 30 years that there's actually been a virus on my system, and that was from a friend that had this strange thing he wanted to show me on the Mac platform. In the early days of the Mac platform, but that's the only time. And you just have to be careful, and in my experience, it just doesn't happen.
Well, it's a great rule. If a friend has a strange thing they want to show you, go with it. Yeah, certainly.
But really, it's very simple to get started. And I tell people, they ask me the same question daily or several times a day. I mean, as long as you dedicate a computer and you get started in this realm, if you want to stay in Windows, I'd suggest ESET has a really good program for virus protection. It has Internet Suite. It also has the disk space. It's very user friendly. It's very easy to install. You just want to think about the simple things that you want to do here. It probably takes me 45 minutes to do a Windows computer and have it completely set up and running with JRiver and my DAC set up and the hard drive externally and start ripping music. If you do an Apple product, I can probably do it in less than 8 minutes from the start time you push the go button and have everything going. Apple, to me, is more friendly because they've been thinking about this for a lot longer time. They had viruses really early on in the development, and they said, okay, let's get rid of this now. And then those 12-year-old kids moved over to Windows because obviously then they had more fun with that. But really, you can jump in and get started with this stuff. And within an hour or so, you can really be playing music. ESET's a virus protection program for Windows. And
I thought you wouldn't want to run your antivirus while you're.
Oh, no. You know, that actually, the good thing about ESET is it sits way in the background. I mean, if you go with Norton or some of these other ones, they're really up front. But ESET's, really back behind the thing. You barely know it's running at all. It's not really affecting your sound or any quality like that. And one of the things you want to make sure you do is don't overread everything that's going on the internet. Like if you spend hours and hours trying to figure out what the best setup is for your thing, you're never going to get started.
That's me.
I wrote a great paper on Facebook about 3 weeks ago, and it was, everybody's got to stop listening with their eyes because, there's too much rhetoric on the internet about what's best for you. You guys have to start listening more, The difference between file formats. Go ahead and make 8 different types of file formats. Just go through and listen to each one, We have Rebecca Pigeon's Raven. We have 5 different copies of that upstairs. And last night we were listening to each one, and it really surprised me, which ones sounded better than others. And believe me, the 192 did not sound as good as the 88.2. So, these 88.4, those things, you have to spend a little bit of time, and you'll have a lot more benefit, and you'll enjoy this so much better because the journey is, in this case, is fun.
Sorry, Lee.
Okay, I have a question. Well, around '99, I got really into SACDs, and I still have a large collection. I love the format. I think DSD is a pretty interesting recording technology. And now as I walk around here, I sort of have mixed feelings because I'm seeing all these great DSD DACs. And what I've heard so far sounds good. But I'd love to get your opinion about whether you guys see a future for DSD files. Right now, there's very limited software available, but it seems like it's a trend for external DACs to have DSD format. Is this something that's going to survive, or?
He's the one to ask.
DSD, has. Yeah, DSD has been around for quite a long time, and many of you have been listening to DSD without even knowing it, because the first time it actually appeared was in 1987 with an A to D converter. It was all internal, and PCM was outside, but DSD was inside. And then certainly with SSCD, DSD was used as the encoding format, and many people don't even know that. But as SSCD is kind of declining slowly or stabilizing on a low level, the question really is what's happening with DSD, the encoding format that was specifically designed to give us greater range, greater resolution, greater this and greater that. Does it have to die or stabilize with the acceptance or SSCD as a disk format? And the answer really is no. When you look at or compare it with PCM formats, aside from the acoustic or sound quality issue or question is, especially when you go towards downloadable formats, DSD is very bit efficient. It has the bit rate of roughly 24 bits, 96 kilohertz. But it has more resolution, more capacity towards the high end. And especially when you go towards downloads, DSD becomes very efficient. So I believe actually DSD has a bright future when we go or shift from the packaged media to download formats.
I'm going to have to cut us off. I don't want to run over. And thank the panel very much, and thank you for coming.